Hey guys, I'm the Office Chair Quarterback, and I'm here to teach you all the ins and outs of College Football 26. Whether it's Dynasty mode, game mechanics, or mastering the X and O's behind it all, this is your one-stop shop for everything college football. What if I told you that the difference between winning a national championship in, I don't know, season 3 or getting fired just might be your coordinators? Okay, that's a little bit of an overstatement. Yeah, the Jimmy and Joes and the X's and O's are huge, but your coordinators matter too, mainly for their abilities, but no one's talking about it. Well, in today's video, we do a deep dive into College Football 26, looking at every team's offensive and defensive coordinators, all to help you find the right team for your dynasty. All right, so let's get started. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 5 different things. Number 1, why do coordinators matter? Number 2, the coordinator archetypes or their specialty fully tallied up between all the different teams. Number 3, the archetype combos. Which schools have the same type of coordinator? Which type is more common? Which are more rare? Number 4, the best dynasty teams just based off of their coordinators. And number 5, other interesting tidbits based off of the coordinator data. Number 1, why do coordinators matter? Well, coordinators aren't just window dressing, and no, they don't just pick up your coffee. They unlock abilities that make your team better on game day starting day 1. Why? Well, you get access to the same abilities. Your team gets the benefits of the coaching abilities, whether it's your head coach or as a coordinator. So if they've got good abilities, you get those abilities. And the higher level your coordinator is, the more abilities they're gonna have. And their grades matter too. Whether they're rated an A+, a D-, or somewhere in between. Better coordinators will help you recruit better, and they'll help you keep the players you already have. Number 2, now here's the big picture for how the coordinators break down. So you'll see this first column, this is in the alphabetical order of the different coordinator archetypes. And then in the second column is how many coordinators across the league have that archetype or that specialty. Now some of you might notice that all of the coordinator archetypes here don't include every type of archetype. Well, that's because some of the coordinators don't have those. Some of the big ones are going to be CEO, program builder. You won't see that here because those are abilities that are only accessible to the head coach. But for the abilities that coordinators can have, here's what we got throughout the league. Some of the big ones here, there are 54 Master Motivators, 54 coordinators that are scheme gurus, and then coming in at 3rd place, there are 53 with the Architect archetype. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got some archetypes, like I mentioned earlier, that aren't even here. There are no coordinators with those archetypes. And then you've got some like Motivator, where there are only 4 coordinators across the entire league with the Motivator archetype. All right, so what does this mean in practice? Well, let's look at the combos you'll see the most and the rarest pairs of coordinators. All right, so what I did here is, of course, I got this whole Excel spreadsheet. I've gone through all the coordinators, got all the data, everything's right there. And I just made a pivot table to kind of summarize this. So first, let's look at the grand totals. So we'll start with offensive coordinators. So for example, how many offensive coordinators throughout the league are elite recruiters? Well, offensive coordinators is here at the top. You just find the column with elite recruiters right here. We'll just talk about the grand totals right now. Go all the way down. There are 7. So there are 7 elite recruiter offensive coordinators. Let's look at strategists. How many offensive coordinators are strategists? Boom, it's 22 right there. Now let's look at the defensive coordinators. How many defensive coordinators have the architect archetype? Well, let's look right here. Here's defensive coordinators. Here's the row for architect. Grand total 20. So you can see how you can kind of read it there. But what's going on in between the grand totals? Because we've already kind of looked at the grand totals added up before. Well, what's in here is kind of looking at the combos of which team has which coordinator together. So for example, we'll just look at architects first. So which team has an offensive coordinator that has an architect? Well, there's 33 of them, so we're going to be in this column. But then you can see which team has a defensive coordinator that matches whatever you want with that architect. So you go here, you look at offensive coordinators, this first column, architect. Well, let's look at, are there any other schools that have a defensive coordinator that's also an architect? Yes, there are 3. So this 3 right here means there are 3 teams that have an offensive coordinator that's an architect, and a defensive coordinator that's an architect. Now let's look at something else that's not a pair. We'll look at offensive coordinators that are scheme gurus. So 25 total, but let's say we want an offensive coordinator that's a scheme guru, but a defensive coordinator that is an elite recruiter. Well, how many teams have that? So you go here, scheme guru under offensive coordinator, then you find defensive coordinator, elite recruiter, there are 6. So 6 different schools have both an offensive coordinator that's a scheme guru and a defensive coordinator that's an elite recruiter. Oh, and another interesting thing about right here, so you look, there is one team out there in the league that has an elite recruiter for their offensive coordinator and an elite recruiter for the defensive coordinator. You might be thinking Alabama, Ohio State, one of those big powerhouses. Nope. One school's got them both, and it's Delaware, one of the 2 new schools. The other new school, Missouri State, they didn't get such love. Their coordinators are a little different. But again, it all depends on, it's not a better or worse, it just depends on kind of what play style you want. All right, now let's move to number 4. Now let's look at the best dynasty teams just based off of who their coordinator is. Now again, this is gonna depend on your play style, which kind of coordinator you want, but I'm just trying to look at just adding up who's the most experienced, who's gonna give you the most bang for your buck right now. So what I did is I looked to see how many coordinator skill points each team has. So what does that mean? Well, it's just like being a head coach. You know, you start with 10 different skill points that you can spend on abilities at level 1. Each time you level up, you get 10 skill points or abilities. I think the max level now in this game is level 100. So if you get to a level 100, that means that you'll have 1,000 skill points that you can spend. So what I did is I tracked every single coordinator, what level they are. So whether they're level 10 or level 29 or whatever. And then I multiplied that by 10 because again, every level you are, you get 10 skill points. And then I added up the skill points that the offensive coordinator has and the defensive coordinator has to get a kind of a total of coordinator skill points per team. And then what I did is I broke it up into just different prestige levels for the whole school. And so the result is this chart right here. And so just if you're curious, take a look that the few schools that are 5-star programs, got that 5-star prestige, well, on average, their coordinators total have 534 skill points. Whereas, you go down just 1-star level down to 4, it's 433 on average. So the average of every 4-star program has 433 skill points for their coordinators, about 100 less. And it goes all the way down to there are 2 teams that only have half a star for their prestige. Those coordinators together combined only average 255 skill points. And a different way to look at this is you see there's a graph right here showing the same exact information just in a graph form. And you'll notice how flat it is up to 2 stars. Then you kind of get a big jump going up to 2.5, and then there's a steady increase. And then you can see there's kind of a big noticeable jump again, moving from 4 to 4.5 stars. So this is something that's just kind of interesting to think about, or it might be something really, really important for your league. But you guys, I know there's leagues out there, I'm in a few, where you kind of have restrictions on what team that you can choose. So not everyone can just come in and get the 4.5 or 5-star teams. So this is kind of just a little cheat sheet that you can use to see, well, hey, if I've got to pick a team at this prestige level or this prestige level, or if you're kind of deciding between 2, you can just do a quick little look at this graph or this chart and see, what kind of benefits are you just on average getting from your coordinator. So as you can see, there's a difference between how your coordinators are and the prestige level of your school. Now, that's kind of obvious. Yeah, Alabama's going to have, but they're going to have better recruiters than, Delaware or Missouri State, right? But what's really interesting, I think, is that, sometimes even moving up just half a star in prestige can mean an extra 70 to 100 skill points for your coordinators. And that's a massive difference when you're talking about season 1 or season 2 of your dynasty. All right, next let's look at the top. So enough of averages, enough of looking at the whole league together. Let's look at the top 5 schools by their total coordinator skill points. So here you go, you've got Penn State, number 1, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Clemson. What's interesting here is you'll see the team that actually has the most coordinator skill points, Penn State, they're actually not even a 5-star program. They're only at 4.5. Same thing is true of Clemson. But of course, these guys here, I mean, they're the top dogs. You guys know that. And yeah, they've got coordinator skill points ranging from 550 to 580. All right, so that was the top 5. Now what about the bottom 5 programs based off their coordinator skill points? Well, you've got at the bottom Bowling Green, East Carolina, Marshall, Troy, and Florida Atlantic. Funny enough about this is the prestige levels actually go down all the way to 1 or even half a star. Those aren't the worst teams here, just based off of their coordinators. We've got the schools right here. But yeah, you've got, it's a tight band here. Bowling Green at 230, Florida Atlantic at 240. But again, you just look at that, compare it to the top 5 teams, and we're talking about that's over 300 skill point differences between both coordinators, and that's really going to add up. I mean, especially if you're competing with your friends or coworkers in online dynasties. All right, now section 5. Here's some other tidbits to help you find your perfect dynasty, or just, maybe you're interested in this kind of stuff. So here are some of the first thing I want to talk about is some of the teams that have huge gaps between their offensive and defensive coordinators. So what I did is look at the difference between the levels of the offensive and defensive coordinators. Just thought it was kind of interesting. So who's got the biggest difference between their coordinators? Number 1 is Nebraska. Their offensive coordinator is level 30, but their defensive is only level 29. So you've got a difference of 9 or 90 skill points right there. Then you've got Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and SMU. Now again, does this really mean anything? I mean, probably not. I mean, if you want to play Nebraska real bad, there's lots of reasons to play Nebraska. And there's lots to not play them. This probably doesn't matter, but again, it just goes into kind of an interesting distinction of how EA has decided to give levels to these coordinators, and then, yeah, maybe, who knows, in a later video, we could actually go into who the real life coordinators are, their background, how they got to where they are, to kind of see why you have some of these differences. Because again, some schools, they've got a level 19 offensive coordinator and a level 19 defensive. But then you got some schools with a difference like this. All right, next, let's look at some more outliers. Because some schools, their coordinators punch above their prestige, like Penn State outperforming its 4.5-star rating. But others lag behind and could drag you down. So keep an eye out for these outliers when picking your dynasty. So what I did here is I just tallied up the different levels of the coordinators, the skill points they have, and then just grouped all the teams by their prestige level. And then what I did is I compared that team, looked at their average skill points by coordinator, and then compared that to all the other teams within that tier. And here are the results. Here are some of the big outliers. So I've got Penn State at the top, a positive number here. So what this column here means the delta with conference average. This is looking at the coordinator skill points compared to the other teams within that own tier. So what I've included in this table is the teams that have above a 14% difference. I've got Penn State here just because they're one of the top teams at the top, but everything else here, this is only the teams that have a difference between the average of over 14%. If it's a positive number, that means their coordinators are outperforming other coordinators in that tier. And if it's a negative number, it means that they're performing a little less. So some of the big ones here, you'll see Nebraska. Now they got a 25.86%. Now, yeah, Nebraska, they used to be a big powerhouse in the 90s. So some people might be thinking, man, 3.5 is pretty low. But, they haven't been as good lately. Well, for those that are big Nebraska fans and are still living the glory days of the 90s, yeah, you've only got 3.5 stars, but the EA did you right with the coordinators. Your coordinators are good. You got Purdue also, a 24% difference in a good way compared to other teams that only have a 2-star rating. On the other hand, there are some teams that are doing worse, of course, than the rest of their tier level. You've got Washington, a 4-star team. Yeah, they're underperforming by about 19%. And then just down the road, also you've got Washington State, a 3-star team that's also underperforming by about 15%. Now, all right, so does having coordinators that are 15, 16% better or worse than the tier average. Does it really matter that much? I mean, probably not. But if you're in a competitive league, or if you just want to win that battle league, then every single little difference like this matters. So that's it for my first deep dive into College Football 26's coordinators. Let me know in the comments below, which coordinators have you found that are gems and which ones are busts? And if you want more videos like this, I love positive encouragement. So please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.